Men, this is the Pelican 1750 rifle case. I am going to prepare it for my Browning X-Bolt Pro. Never a good idea to pick up a gun by the optic. And cutting the foam to prepare it to fit in there perfectly. I watched a whole bunch of other guys on YouTube who had great tutorials, but they all used an electric knife. I don't have one, and so I set out to find a better way to cut it. And the good news is you do not need an electric knife. You need to search through your pockets awkwardly on YouTube. Just use your skinning knife. This is the Havalon knife, and I've tested it already. It works exceptionally well, just a super sharp skinning knife. And the reason I think it works better than an electric knife is, an electric knife, it won't do the corners quite as neatly. So you kind of have to go from one direction and then go from the other. And sometimes you'll not quite get them to match, so it won't quite look as clean. This one is such a skinny little blade that you can easily just navigate the corners no problem without ever picking up your blade after you've started. So first thing you're going to need to do is get a Sharpie. I did try tailor's chalk, like for clothes sewing. I know a lot about sewing. Yeah, right. And it didn't work. It didn't work on this foam. So Sharpie, I think, is the way to go. So just use a black Sharpie. Don't worry about the lines. They won't show because we're actually going to flip this afterward. So it's just going to be showing on the bottom. It's kind of like my wife when she sets, she'll set a couch up and she'll need to vacuum the carpet for where the couch is going to go. And it's like, what? Who cares? So if you're that kind of person, you might need a different solution. But if the Sharpie not showing is good enough for you, then this is, I think, the best way to go. Okay, so you'll set your rifle on the correct place. Now, you have to think about not just what your rifle is today, but what your rifle could become. I almost started cutting here with the muzzle brake on this gun, and this muzzle brake has been driving me nuts. I would prefer to shoot without the muzzle brake. This is a 28 nozzler, and it does have significant recoil, but I just hate the sound from these things. They just drive me nuts. I'd rather shoot without a muzzle brake. So, don't cut it until you're sure. Muzzle brake on, muzzle brake off. Do you need place to add a suppressor? If the government ever lets you have one in the next 15 years, then, make sure you have a space here. Do you want your bolt in or do you want your bolt out? Also, are you going to want two guns in the case? That was a tough call for me. So I put this in to leave enough space that I could cut in a second gun. I didn't like how close that put my optic. And so I just decided this chunk of foam is just for this gun and it's not going to be a double gun case. I just want, because this is my primary gun. This is where I'm going to take when I go to Africa. I'm going to take my kids on a hog hunt next month. When I'm flying, this is the gun I want to bring usually. So I'm going to cut this right. If you do need another piece of foam, you can get another piece of foam from Pelican's website or also on Amazon. Okay, so I lined everything out exactly where I want it to be, but do note that this is going to flip when we put it in the actual case. So this is going to be down. So make sure it's how you want because you're going to have your handle up on this side. So be sure that you're putting it in the way that you're going to want it to be in the case. But of course we could rotate it this way. Okay, so everything's ready. I've just marked a perfect outline, just like you would do with your hand or something, or a dead body after you've killed somebody. When you're marking it, do be careful that you're not putting the fat marker and putting this a 1/4 inch out. I just get straight over it as I'm doing it, so I can see the perfect outline of what the edge of the gun is. Especially like a stock, kind of rounded here. Just get straight over it as you're doing it so that Sharpie line is just right along the outside of it. Okay, now we're going to take our gun and bolt off. And we're going to just start cutting. I want you to see how easy this is with a skinning knife. You really don't need an electric knife. All right, we're ready to cut. I'm just going to place some kind of cutting board or cutting sheet here underneath. I also forgot to mention earlier, you want to keep everything at least at least, I don't know, I would say 1.5 inches, that nothing's too tiny in there. You know, don't try to cut the space between your scope and the barrel. So we're just going to make one nice incision. You want to make sure you're perfect 90 degrees to the ground, you're perfectly flat, and just watch how well this knife cuts. There's no sawing that's going to leave an unclean edge or anything. I mean, this just cuts like butter through this stuff. Now I just need to put in almost no effort. This blade just cuts it like butter. I have finished my cuts now. It is the moment of truth. Now, I will say that toward the very, very end of this, I started to notice one or two tiny, tiny little pieces just tore a tiny little bit. And I'm kind of thinking it's like, you know, like women with sewing scissors and stuff, that they can get dulled just by cutting paper instead of cloth. I'm kind of thinking, you know, these are super, super sharp blades, these Havalon blades. But I'm wondering if on this it's starting to get a tiny bit. So you may even consider a blade change if you find that necessary. But I mean, it was tiny, tiny, tiny. So we're about to punch these out, and we never even needed to lift up our blades. So these should be just as clean as can be. A couple little spots where I didn't quite get thick enough, get quite through. But I mean, man, that just looks dang clean to me. I'm pretty happy with that. There are a couple little spots in here where I can see that I moved the knife a little bit. I'm going to try to go through and just clean those up a teeny, teeny bit. But this is looking really, really clean to me. All right, you guys, now the reveal. I mean, it just came out so clean. All the cuts are just, well, you can see here, but it just, I'm really happy with it. So I would not go to the electric knife method. I watched a bunch of tutorials on YouTube, and there were some great ones with the electric knife, but looking at the cuts, to me, it actually isn't quite as clean as this. So I will link in the description to my little Havalon knife, but I'm sure you guys all have one. They're cheap on Amazon. If you would give me a subscribe to this channel, I'm putting out a video multiple times a week. We're just going crazy on this, putting out the best resources I can for guys who are going on hunts and shooting and sharing in the outdoors lifestyle.